Welcome to the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Bell, and I interview business leaders who are committed to their own growth and the development of everyone on their team. If you enjoy my podcast, be sure to subscribe and rate it on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for joining me today. I bet you've read, or at least heard of, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey. It's become a classic, and a key reason is that the 7 principles are timeless and they can apply to all of us. What many of you don't know is that Stephen was working on his last book with his daughter, Cynthia Covey Haller, before his death in 2012. It took several more years for her to complete it, and that book is now available because Cynthia saw it through to publication. The book is called, and I have it right here, Live Life in Crescendo. Your most important work is always ahead of you. I'm very excited to have Cynthia as my guest today. She's going to take us behind the scenes about the creation of the book and the key message that Stephen was eager to get out to the world in the last years of his life. So welcome, Cynthia, to my show.
Thanks so much, Meredith. I'm so thrilled to be on. Thanks for having me.
Well, I am thrilled to have you because I loved this book. I loved the message, and just the themes that ran through it were just resonated with me. So let's begin by having you tell us the story behind the writing of the book.
Yeah, I'd love to. It came about in the first place because I foolishly asked my dad one day if he was going to ever write anything as good as the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And, I think my question kind of insulted him. He said, well, gosh, I wrote that in 1989. And what do you think I've been doing since? I feel like I have more to contribute. I have other ideas and principles that I think are timeless and universal also, that I think are super important. And one of them was his personal mission statement, the last 10 years of his life, which was live life in crescendo. And he adopted that because people were asking him when he was in his 70s if he was still going to keep working and keep speaking and going at this rate that he was at. And he felt like, gosh, I still have so much to contribute. I feel like I'm just peaking, and I want to keep contributing and being out there. And I feel like I'm making a contribution to those that maybe are looking for some sort of leadership ideas. And so anyway, he assigned me, he said, how about if he was working on, and this was in 2008, so a long time ago, but he was working on several projects and books at the same time. And so he asked me to take this one and to find examples that were inspiring of people that live in crescendo. And are you musical, Meredith?
No, I'm not.
I'm not either. My mother had a beautiful voice, but my dad did not, and neither did I. But crescendo, as you know, if you've been to a concert, grows in power and intensity and energy, and it's amazing. It fills the arena. Yeah, it keeps increasing. Where the opposite of diminuendo is where it slows and it goes softer, and eventually it comes to an end. It stops. And so his idea was that at every age and stage of your life, we should continually, like crescendo, keep learning, keep growing, changing, reinventing ourselves, trying new things, keep expanding, living in crescendo. And that we have a choice in different circumstances to choose to live in crescendo or to live in diminuendo, which is the easier route. And the subtitle of the book, he felt was just as important as the title. Your most important work is always ahead of you. And he felt like that's the crescendo mentality, that you keep thinking, okay, I have had success. I've been at maybe the pinnacle of success, or I've overcome a life-changing experience, but I've gone through some rough times. But what's next? What's ahead of me? And he really believed and felt that your most important work, you get up every day to accomplish it, and it still could be ahead. You don't know if that's your greatest contribution or not. So keep going.
Yeah, I loved that. Thank you for explaining both the title and the subtitle, because I just connected with that so much. I love the excitement of getting up and wondering, what impact can I have today, and stretching. And the number of examples, which I think you did the research on all those examples, they were, so many and so inspiring. Looking at people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, still looking for the best to be ahead of them. And I just think this book is inspirational no matter where someone is in their career. Talk about the structure. You have that section where people are kind of mid-career feeling success, and another section related to people either approaching retirement or ending the current career that they were in. What were some distinctions between those groups?
Well, as I said, the crescendo mentality could be applied at any stage or age of your life, beginning as a teenager, beginning younger. But we identified four main areas, and one was a midlife, where it seems like a lot of people have a midlife crisis, and they get to be 50 or 60, and they think, wow, I'm this age, and what have I really done? Am I successful? Where do I feel like I am? I felt like I'd be further down the road at this point. One man, for example, his business fell apart. He started a construction business, and his partners took over and basically kicked him out. And he was 47 and had 4 kids, and thought, what am I going to do? I'm approaching 50. I don't have a career, and decided to reinvent himself and chose to go back to law school, totally different career. And enrolled he was 48 years old when he was the oldest one in his law class, people twice the age of the others. And he said one morning he pulled into the law school parking lot, and it was pitch dark. It was the middle of winter, icy cold, and fear and despair just crept over him. And he thought, what have I done? I'm almost 50 and I'm starting law school. And he determined that I'm not going to look back. I'm going to keep looking forward. My father taught that as you're driving along in a car, if you were to look in your rearview mirror, if you were to look behind you or over your shoulder all the time as you're going, you're not going to get very far. You may end up in a ditch. And he said, don't look in the rearview mirror, past failures or successes. Look ahead at what's coming and what you can bring about. And so he determined to do this, and dug down deep, and went through law school in a year and a half. And by the time he was 50, he was in a new promising career, and soon had more work than he could handle. And so the midlife is where we have to decide, what are my most important roles? What are the things I'm good at, and examine them. And if we need to change and adjust. Then the next one was pinnacle of success. And I used an example of Jimmy Carter in that section. That here he reached the pinnacle of success, the president of the United States. And you think, wow, as soon as he's done, what do most presidents do? They retire, they build a library, they give expensive speeches. But President Carter did not get reelected. And so it was probably very disappointing to he and Rosalind. But they went back with the idea that the most important work was still ahead of them. And look what they're known for today. The Carter Center, Habitat for Humanity, helping with resolving peace all across the world. He was not known as our best president, but he is definitely our best post-president. His most important work was still ahead. And he didn't think of, okay, I was the president and that's it. He went on and did actually greater things than he did as president. And then the third area is life-changing setbacks. We all face hard things, a divorce, bad health, death of a loved one, business failure. How are we going to respond to what life throws at us? You mentioned that our family had some struggles ourselves. I talked about our life-changing experiences, that with my mom having back surgery, and then later my father had frontotemporal dementia, something that people didn't know, in his late 70s. And we had to decide how we were going to respond to these things. So anyway, that's the third one, is life-changing experiences. And then the last one is the second half of life. As we get older, the tendency is to pull back and to decrease our circle of influence. That's one of my father's talks about in the 7 Habits, is increasing your circle of influence. And he taught that as we get older, we should expand more. We should keep learning, keep growing, and that we need some eustress in our life, some helpful stress that will give us a purpose and a reason to get up in the morning so we can still contribute. So those are basically the 4 areas. I go into a lot more examples and things in the book, but.
Oh, yes. Yes, you do. And in fact, the common thread that runs through all of them is this whole idea of service and contribution. And so I just see that as the key message there, challenging us to ask, how can I be of service to others? How can I make a contribution that lasts beyond my lifetime? And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that. Why, from his point of view, and yours too, I'm sure, why was that so important?
My father strongly believed that life is not about accumulation, it's about contribution. And he felt that in every stage of your life, that those people that are contributing, that are looking to bless others, that are serving, that are becoming mentors to someone else, are the happiest, most fulfilled people, plus the benefits that they give to so many others to inspire them to bring out the greatness in themselves. One of the main quotes of the book is the meaning of life is to find your gift, and the purpose of life is to give it away. And that was by Pablo Picasso. And I talk in the book, we mention a lot of examples about people that find their unique gift or mission. My father loved Viktor Frankl, and he was fond on quoting him for saying that we don't invent our missions, but we detect them. We detect them within ourselves. And so we challenge in this book to find your own unique mission, find your niche where you feel like, okay, I care about education. I care about children learning in these overcrowded school districts, that I could go in and help be an assistant. I could help read. I could volunteer. I could help in the library. One man named Mike Mason was retired from the FBI in his mid-60s. And he said he sat home in his rocking chair for about a week and thought, I'm not doing this again. And he looked around his community and he realized in Georgia that there were very few bus drivers, that they definitely needed them. Now, his former occupation was in the FBI. He was the number 4 man in the FBI, and he applied to be a bus driver. They get his application, and the head guy called and said, did you do this on purpose? You know that we don't pay much, and you were in the FBI, and you're applying to be a bus driver. And he said, we have to get past the idea that there are no unimportant jobs. What could be more valuable than helping educate children and being a small part in this process? He said, I continue to progress in my career. I love that. From being an FBI person to progress in his career, he felt like he still had important work ahead of him. And so service is the link that we can do in every stage. That a lot of times my father would ask in his presentations, how many of you have experienced the level of success that you did largely because someone believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself? I don't know about you, Meredith. Do you have someone you could point to who believed in you when maybe you didn't?
Oh, sure. I mean, I can think of several people, my parents to start with.
Right.
They always had a firm belief in my capabilities, and a manager that I had that just really saw my potential and gave me free rein to grow and try things, which was
Think how
amazing confidence builder.
think of the value that was to your life. So then he would say, are you attempting to do the same with someone else? Identify who those people are. And maybe your listeners could think to themselves, who in my family, do I have a family member who's struggling with an addiction that's overcoming their life, taking over and destroying them? Do I see somebody in my neighborhood or in my church or at my work who I can tell admires me or looks up to me? Maybe I'm their manager, maybe I'm their boss, or maybe it's an associate. How could I be a mentor to that person? My father had a unique definition of leadership. He said that leadership is communicating another's worth and potential so clearly that they are inspired to see it in themselves. And that's what we're talking about with this mentorship. Communicating, like you said, your manager to you, your worth and potential, so that you too can see it. And so who are you doing that for now in your life at whatever stage that you're in? That's an important part of service is mentoring.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love that definition of leadership too, because you can get bogged down in mechanics and it's so many specifics, but that general principle of how am I interacting with this person so they see what they're capable of, because I see it. Too often we focus on what the person's doing wrong, how
Right.
they fall short. And with that kind of lens, it just makes such a difference. In fact, there was a line I wrote down to share because I just loved this around contribution. It said, "It is contribution that brings light to the eye and meaning to the soul."
Yes, that's true. Think about everybody kind of knows what they care about, what they, some cause or something in the community or somewhere where they, if you are introspective and you try to think, I want to discover my own unique mission. If we are silent within ourselves and we use our conscience and we write down things that we see great needs, or we have a passion for something, everyone thinks they have to do something extraordinary to make an extraordinary difference, and you really don't. I talk in the book, there's an example of a woman, it was actually Pamela Atkinson, who is a homeless advocate who she grew up in poverty, and she ended up working with those that were homeless. And she saw some homeless men standing around one cold day without gloves. And she ran into the store and bought a pair. There were six of them for all of them and passed them out. And this man later told her, he said, my self-esteem was very low at that moment. I didn't believe in myself. But he said, I thought to myself, you must be worth something. Somebody you don't even know gave you a brand new pair of gloves. And from that point on, he kept those gloves as a reminder that people do care, and of an example of, I do have worth and potential. And he later met this woman, where he was volunteering now in a homeless advocacy place, and had pulled himself out of it and had become a successful person, and said, I still have those gloves to show that, that represented, it was a small thing that you did for us, but it changed his life. So sometimes we're thinking, we have to, we're not going to win a Nobel Peace Prize. We're not the president of something, but what about the local food bank that's struggling? That could we, during the pandemic, people opened their garages and just texted their friends and said, we're collecting food. And I know neighbors around my neighborhood that did that, and we filled a whole garage. People volunteered. One friend of mine had breast cancer, and she contacts other people that she finds has breast cancer in her neighborhood and her community, and goes and visits them and gives them hope, shows them that she's alive and well, and gives them encouragement. So there's so many little things that we can do in our families, start there, in our community, where we can make a huge difference if we just start. And Theodore Roosevelt said, do what you can let's see, do what you can with what you have where you are. I love
Mm-hmm.
that.
I know that's such a great quote, because sometimes we don't take action because we think, what good will this small thing do? But
Right.
your illustration, and I loved reading that story with the gloves, because it's so poignant and it's just such a clear example of how a small gesture of kindness can have an amazing ripple effect.
Right.
And that whole thing of crescendo, just you build up and you build up, and the impact is just enormous, even though it may seem in the moment to be something small.
Yeah, very small. One older woman was challenged to make a difference to people, and saying that just one person can impact someone else. And she said, "I'm in my mid-70s and I'm homebound pretty much, and I have a very small income. How could I possibly make a difference?" And she was challenged, "Could you donate 1 can of soup a week?" And she said, "Yes, I could do that." She said, "Imagine a homeless mother warming up that can of soup for 2 or 3 hungry children. And so they're going to bed feeling full and fed. Do you think that that would make a difference to that family?" Of course it would. And so this woman kind of forgot, I can't make a difference. And every week she donated 1 can of soup, and ultimately, provided hundreds of meals for people that wouldn't have had food. So we don't need to start big. We can do something small. We all see needs around us. A lonely neighbor whose grass is dying and the flowers are gone, that you could spend an hour weeding or talking to them, bringing them some food. That we don't have to go further than across the street or in our own families to see those that are really struggling and make a huge difference. Showing interest in someone who's just got divorced, and how lonely they are, and how vulnerable, and their children, how are they coping, and what a difference we can make if we just get involved and just start.
Mm-hmm.
It's living in crescendo.
Yes. Well, a key word that you said is notice. We need to notice these things, raising our awareness of that. And I think when we come from this place of wanting to be of service, wanting to make a contribution, and we're looking out from that perspective, then we're going to easily see the opportunities. It's
Yeah.
just that when we have our heads down doing our own thing,
Right.
focused on our own lives and our own struggles, whatever they may be, that we don't even see, we don't notice. So I think that's a key step in this process.
Yeah, I agree. The tendency as you start to age and get older, get in your 60s, 70s, 80s, is, like I was saying, to have your circle shrink, when you should expand your circle of influence. It should be the time. My father believed that this period of time, the second half of life, was the most exciting time, because you have the most time you've ever had. You've got a wealth of knowledge, of contacts, of networking, of understanding systems, and you've had a lifetime of employment and raising children, and what great things you have to offer, rather than, been there, done that. I mean, you're done. Society kind of tells us, well, we'll put you on a shelf now. You're 65 or whatever, so you should be finished. And my father was talking about this crescendo idea in a speech one time, and a man that was listening to him just stood up in the session and started talking to people around him, and he seemed so animated and so excited. And he talked to him after, and he said, "Well, I'm a circuit judge, and I was going along with the idea that I'm approaching 65. I thought I was going to retire, but the idea that you gave me, that I still have a lot to contribute. I still am healthy. I still love my job. I have a passion for it. I know my city more than anyone. I feel like I could serve a lot. And I just decided I'm going to defy that, and the social norm, and keep working." And it was so empowering to me to think, no, I still have important work ahead of me. He always believed it was a false dichotomy, that there's two options as you get older: either keep working or retire. And he said that's a false dichotomy. It should be the third alternative, is make a contribution. And whether or not you choose to keep at your profession, there's lots of people that are in their 70s, 80s, 90s, still contributing, still working in their profession and their career, or you choose to step away from it. Even though you do that, maybe you're not active in your job or career. Never retire from making meaningful contributions to those around you. And you can do that whether you're working or whether you're retired.
Yes, as I was reading that chapter on the whole retirement and continuing to make contributions, I thought, wow, he's really turning this on its head.
Yeah.
Because there are, and studies that have been done, when people retire and they kind of lose their sense of purpose, they can die rather quickly because they don't have that inner drive, that meaningfulness to their lives any longer, because it was all put over in that one thing they were doing. And I loved your dad's perspective and the examples you all gave in that section of people in their 90s, continuing to discover things that they can do. And of course, there's the caveat, not everybody is going to, go that route, but there are still other ways that they can make contributions. Talk about the women in the senior home that were working like gangbusters to provide for others. I loved that story.
It was one of my favorite interviews to do. It was called the Seville Retirement Home, and the main woman was in her late 70s. They were all in this retirement home, and they didn't want to sit there and watch TV and sleep and just fade away. They didn't have a purpose. And so this woman, Norma Wilcox, decided, she found out that the humanitarian center was collecting quilts and clothes for children in the faraway countries. And so she got a group together and organized these 70s, 80s, 90-year-old people. She had 30 or 40 that would sew, they would cut, they would stuff balls, they would make quilts. It was like a factory. And the woman that was over them called it the life-saving room. They had a purpose to get up. They challenged themselves. We're going to make 30 quilts this week. And we're going to make this many little dresses. We're going to stuff this many balls that are fabric balls. They found out that children were playing with rocks for a ball and had sticks for a doll. And they were like a factory. They produced all these wonderful things that were sent abroad. And she said, God helps us with our projects. He said, sure, our hands hurt from arthritis and some of us can't see. I get them to stuff things. Somebody can't cut, they stack, they do things. They were so involved. They said, we imagine a little boy or girl in these countries, these third world countries that were receiving these things, and the joy on their face as a girl had a little doll to hold instead of some rags. And I imagine that a little boy looking so cute in this shirt and pants. And she said, it was the life-saving room. She said, those that weren't involved in this project would literally pass away so quickly because they didn't have purpose. My father loves to quote Dr. Selvig in The Stress of Life, is this doctor that talks about that everyone thinks stress is so bad for you. And he said, there is harmful stress, but he said, eustress is the helpful stress. And that is something to do, a purpose, a reason to get up. And he said, as we age, we need eustress. We need some deadlines of, I've got to get this finished, this quilt done. I've got a reason to get up. I get the blood flowing. And he said, if you don't do this, you can, your degenerative forces are at work. But as you do have purpose in your life and you have projects, something ahead of you to anticipate and to be involved in, he said, it stops the degenerative forces in your body, and these people lived longer. They just there's studies that show anyone involved and with a purpose had not only had happiness, but actually lived longer lives. And so we can do things. I think of Julie Andrews. She, in her 60s, had throat cancer. And here she's this beautiful 5-octave soprano voice. And this was her MO. Like you said, sometimes you label yourself, I'm an actress, or I'm a author, I'm this and that. And when that ends, you think my life is over. Well, this ended for her. She couldn't sing anymore. And she said at first she went into a depression, and because this is who she was. And then she decided, like she said, just like in The Sound of Music, when one door closes, somewhere God opens a window. And she said that she decided, maybe I have to do something else. And she and her daughter began writing children's books. The very Fairy Princess, which became a New York Times best-selling book. And she said, had I not had that happen to me and been kind of forced into something else, I never would have enjoyed that pleasure of writing children's books and having a whole new audience of people that gave me purpose and meaning in my life again. I thought that she was inspiring.
Well, that is, and it's just the perfect example of that crescendo mentality that you're talking about, that the next thing is going to be the best thing in your life. And, I think that it really does require an adjustment in mindset, Cynthia, in terms of how we see everything that happens with us, around us, in our lives. We can become victims of, we say, well, that happened to me, instead of, well, that happened. Now, what can I make of it going forward? And there were so many examples in your book of, especially in that chapter or the section on the setbacks and what people have endured and what they have created from the trauma or the illness or whatever the adversity was that they faced.
Right.
So
my father talks about, we have a choice. You have a choice when things happen to you. We most often can't control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond to it, how we react. And he calls this the crescendo mentality. And you're right, it is a new paradigm. It's a perspective. It's like putting on a pair of glasses. It's a different way to see things, that despite circumstances and setbacks, what am I going to choose? How am I going to let this affect me? Michael J. Fox is the perfect example of, here in the height of his career, in his high 20s, he contracts Parkinson's disease. And he said at first he just drank himself silly because he was so devastated by it and he didn't know how to respond. And then he decided, I have so many other options. The only thing I can't choose is whether or not I have this disease. And he has gone on to become the face of Parkinson's. Do you know that he's raised $1 billion for Parkinson's? And has gone on to testify in front of the Senate. He had the courage to not take his medication and show the congressman what happens with people that can't afford their medication, what the reality of it is like, reacting without the medication. And has become, his greatest work was clearly ahead. He was an awesome actor and still, was involved in that. But his most important work, and he would agree, is what he has created for Parkinson's. So he didn't know what he still had to contribute.
Yeah, no, that was such an inspiring story. And he still is inspiring. He is so beloved by people who know him or even just know of him. And his relentless work in that area. There was someone else that I would love for you to talk about, because to me, she was inspiring with the amount of time she invested after her own, career retirement. And that was Hester Rippey. Talk a little bit about what she had been doing and what she decided she was going to dedicate the rest of her life to doing.
Well, she had a pretty normal life, that she raised children and was involved in the community and did different things. And at 77, she moved closer to some of her grandkids and thought, my goal in life is just to spoil my grandkids and just make them happy. And then she looked around her community and realized that the reading rate, the literacy rate was so low among children and even among adults in our community that she was astounded. And so she went to her mayor and begged for like a little closet, basically, to set up shop, and began one by one tutoring and mentoring and teaching children and adults to read. And she was just appalled at the lack of attention to this. And little by little, she persisted. The council people said, oh, we hate it when Hester comes to our meetings because she won't take no for an answer. She got a bigger room. She got more volunteers. She got the school buses to take children from school to her library, to the place that she had for lessons, for starting to read. And into her 80s, she was running this full literacy center. It's called the Hester Libby Literacy Center now, which has taught thousands of children and adults to read, all during her so-called retirement, and all during while she was going to just spoil her grandkids. She looked around, like you were saying, Meredith, and saw a great hole and a great need in her community. And she didn't, she could have said, well, what can I do? I'm 77. I can't do much and I don't have any money. She just got involved. My father talks about R&I, which meant resourcefulness and initiative. And as kids, we hated R&I because we would come home from school and say something like, I hate my math teacher. I'm flunking math and it's my math teacher's fault. He's awful. And my dad would say, use your R&I, make it happen. And that meant use your resourcefulness and initiative. It meant get a tutor, talk to your teacher, talk to the principal, change classes, do what you can, stay after school. It's your job to get a good grade in that class. You can't just blame your teacher, own it, And so someone like Hester Libby used her R&I, her resourcefulness and initiative that she had, the skills she'd built over a lifetime, and she made it happen. And because of that, thousands of people in that community are readers. Her motto was "Readers make leaders," and she said the payoff to her was when a child would be reading and a light would come on in their eyes, and they'd realize they were understanding and comprehending what they were reading. And she said that was all that was worth it to her.
Mm. Yeah, that to me is such a beautiful example, because you have a nice blend in there of celebrities or people who are more well-known and people who are unknown other than maybe in their own communities, right, to have made such an important difference. And there's so many more stories. We could go into them further, but I realize we are coming to a close here. What I want to recommend, Cynthia, is people buy your book. This Live Life in Crescendo is really profound. If you are struggling, if you're wondering what's next, this book will just, I think, I won't say shake you up, but it'll shake your thinking to realize there's so much you're capable of that you may not be seeing. And I think that my listeners are in leadership roles, and I think if they apply this to having greater impact with the people who work on their teams, in their organizations, these principles, just like the 7 Habits book, these principles that are outlined here around that whole crescendo mentality are powerful for life. It's just amazing. And I want to thank and acknowledge you, Cynthia, for your persistence in all that time, the extra time that you invested, interviewing people, learning their stories, writing about them so beautifully and in such a compelling way. You've produced a real masterpiece, and I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Meredith. And as I told you before, I had to live in Crescendo to finish the book. It took 10 years. I was involved. I'm a grandmother of lots of grandkids, and I'm involved in my community, but it took a long time, and I had to believe in myself. I had to, hopefully I had some encouragement before my father passed away, and it was driving me because I knew it was his last mission statement. It's what propelled him. And you mentioned before, sometimes we have health issues. My father, as I mentioned, most people don't know, at the end of his life suffered with front temporal dementia, which was terrible. It robbed him of his gifts, which is speaking and thinking. And it's a rare form of dementia. But so you do it until you can't do it anymore. And that's what we concluded with my father, that he lived in Crescendo until he couldn't do it anymore. And he set the example, but he passed the baton to me. That's what gave me the passion, is that he said, please find examples of people who live in Crescendo and who have important work still ahead of them. Please help others to believe that their most important work still could be ahead, despite horrible things that have happened to them or life-changing things and great setbacks. Keep looking ahead and not in the rearview mirror at what you can accomplish. And that drove me to live in Crescendo myself and finish this book despite a lot of odds. And I feel his happiness. I'm glad that I think he's glad that I finished this, because hopefully it's a domino effect with your listeners, your readers, that people that follow your show and have an impact. They're leaders, and they can influence so many others if they just get involved and start. So I challenge them to do that.
That's great. Thank you. I love that. So how can people connect with you and get a copy of the book?
Oh, that's great. I appreciate that. I'm just, my best social media is LinkedIn. I feel like I can connect with people who are interested there, just under Cynthia Covey Haller. And I'd be happy if you message me or have a question or something. And then the book is published by Simon and Schuster. It's they published my father's. They took a chance on an unknown author and published first 7 Habits of Highly Effective People in 1989. And now they've published his last in 2022, September. So, 2022, last September it came out. And so it's in bookstores everywhere, Barnes and Noble, on Amazon, at franklincovey.com. And I hope that it would inspire you to, that you have great work still ahead, and keep contributing. What a difference you can make to others.
Thank you. That is such an important message, whatever stage we are in life, that we can keep contributing, and our best, if we think of it that way, our best is still in front of us. That adds an excitement, I think, to how we approach every day, that to me is very inspiring. So thank you again, Cynthia, for being with me.
Thanks for having me, Meredith. I appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to my podcast. Now head over to growstrongleaders.com and check out our 2 books, Connect with Your Team and Peer Coaching Made Simple. While you're there, download the free Facilitator Guide to find out how to implement our unique peer coaching system. Until next time, I'm Meredith Bell.